Hello, I'm Shelley Rothus, and I'm a different kind of victim. So far, we've been discussing trauma bonds to what I now call Assoholics toxic pity party addiction. So, I've gone over the stages of the meeting and bonding stage. So, now for the realization stage, that's based upon where the assoholic will actually relate to the victim. The difference is that the assoholic, they're not going to get a pity party. They're going to have to what? They're going to have personal integrity, being the bigger person. That means they need to take responsibility for their chosen behaviors and actions. That goes to where we say that we cannot change people, and that usually means that, don't bother trying to change them. They're going to have to, what? Step up and say, yeah, I was wrong for doing these things. I need to change my behaviors and actions because I'm not going to have healthy relationships if I continue treating people in ways that they don't deserve. If I want them in my life and if I want to have healthy relationships with them. Just like the victim has to realize that they don't deserve to be treated in ill ways. So, I'm going to go to Ken. I had come up with my own mental health therapy, and actually, I've been using that on myself in the current situation. So, where did I come up with that mental health therapy? That was during the time I was trying to escape my 3 assoholics, and it was based upon Ken's inspiration and our relationship. Yes, that's why Ken plays a big role as to my own personal story based upon his words of wisdom and our relationship that we had with each other. So, now how does that can relate to this situation, which helped me with the current situation? So, my mental health therapy is creative, inspirational realization. CAR. I say CAR because what word is that closest to? Care, which has the letter E. Empathy. That's going to be in another topic video based upon my experience that I'll be going over as to the responses that I received after the current situation that actually caused more problems for me as the victim. And that's going to be another topic. So back to the realization and my process of going through my stages based upon the therapy that I created, based upon my inspiration from Ken that I got from him. So, okay, the creative part. What was my first step? I have to thank my friend Nina for that. And that was my first step in the creative part as to my mental health therapy. Now, with Ken's words of wisdom, there are things that can actually apply to other situations. As I've said, is that very few people can actually come up with, advice as to where it can apply to other situations in your life. So, yes, even assoholics, very few of them are actually geniuses. And yes, Ken is a genius. I give him that. He's a total genius. So, what are some things that Ken had said to me? I am too nice, but I choose that, and only I can change that. What else? I'm too trusting. What else? How could that apply to something else? Is that I give way too many chances in most of my relationships, and I always have. And I kept going back to them and choosing to remain in them. Now, where does that situation, the current one, apply to another? That would also apply to my relationship with Ken. As I've stated in another videos, I had realized that I should have ended that relationship with Ken in the last bullying incident, not the recent, the last one. And when was that? When I should have ended it was when I had been shown proof by Santa Viking that Ken was in a hate group where he had stated that he wanted to get rid of me without hurting my feelings. It was extremely painful seeing that, and I should have realized then that that's not something I should tolerate or accept. So, now how does that situation apply to the current one? What did Ken do that was similar to now? So, an alcoholic, they'll try to turn it around and make it out as though the victim was the problem and the bad one. And that's exactly what Ken did. He basically, he did. He blamed me for the stress he was going through and that happening to me, which, like, I realized it wasn't my fault. It was his choice to be in that bullying cult clan, and also being there as, saying that I was getting abused and also engaging in it. So with the current situation, it relates to that because Grumpster had also blamed me for everything that happened. And that's exactly what Ken did. What else? Grumpster also denies what he did wrong when I know it was wrong what he had chose to do, but guess what? So did Ken. So what happened after I was shown that screenshot of Ken being in that hate group? I actually approached Ken, and guess what? The same excuses and exceptions that I've been bringing up, that he used the same one when he was ghosting me. When I had shown him the screenshots, the proof of him being in that hate group, his excuse was that he's been busy and he doesn't know what's going on. Yet he was in there and he engaged in it. Yet he didn't know what was going on. See? Excuses and exceptions. Same with Grumpster. Tried to blame it on me, saying, you did this to me and da 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 da. Not saying, well, I did this, I'm the one that caused it, and apologizing. That's right. So that's where I had seen with my new boundary that I just recently made after making out my boundaries. The first new boundary I made was after the recent bullying incident with Ken, which happened to be is that I'm not going to tolerate or accept is that somebody interferes with the relationship that's important to me and has meaning. And that was because of Ken being the first person that I trusted, that I felt comfortable with, that I respected, and I had felt strongly about that. And I had then decided that I'm never going to be friends with somebody who interfered with relationships that were important to me. The same applies with my 3 Assoholics. I felt that way about my mother and sister, that I will never forgive them for ruining the relationship with my father. And now, again, the same applies with the current situation. I didn't forgive Aska for interfering with my relationship with Grumpster. But guess what? That's where I came up with the new boundary. And that would be, is that I'm not going to stay in a relationship with somebody like what happened with Ken, even if I see them highly and they were sentimental within my life. And I valued their relationship and, was sad to let it go and didn't want to. So that's where I had to realize that I should have ended that relationship. Just like now I realize I need to end it. That goes to where I can't change that person and what they're doing to me. And that goes back to Lord Dorpshada. So the one thing he said is very true, that things will just continue to get worse. That's another thing I realized with the current situation, is that things were already bad in the relationship. So what made it hard? Most people didn't understand, why I was, it was so hard for me to just let go. That's where the wants and the needs come in. So what was so different about Grumpster as to what made it hard? As I've stated with Ken, it was because of him being the first person I trusted. What was it with Grumpster? Oh boy. Grumpster is the first person I ever felt love with. And he's the first intimate partner that I ever felt love with, that I fell in love with. Which, of course, for me, is very hard that I'll have to tie that person as being the first person that I fell in love with to being someone that did harmful things that are unacceptable to me, and also doing abusive behaviors. So most people think it's the recent incident as to what he had done, but it's actually the things that happened before that that actually hurt me the most. Most people see the one thing as being the most inexcusable and unacceptable, but it was actually things before that as to where I should have left, but I still stayed because of those feelings that I never had. I didn't want to lose them, but eventually, just like Lord Dopesharter had told me, is that it's just going to get worse, and it did, and it never changed. So just like with Ken, I was hoping that things would get better, but look how things ended up. They got really, really bad, and he ended up doing the most despicable, cruel thing that anybody has ever done to me. So how did I end up with Grumpster? It was after the recent bullying incident, after I'd gone through the worst depression I can ever remember after what Ken had done to me, and then also being traumatized afterwards as to where I had social anxiety, had issues with people, even anybody touching me. Then I met Grumpster, and there was a connection, and I actually felt safe and comfortable in the beginning stages, when we first started going out. That's when I started falling in love afterwards, and unfortunately that's when Asuka came into the picture and things just went, downhill. That's when he started to even stand me up, ghost me, and talk to me in disrespectful ways. And I already know that Asuka had played a role in that. And, of course, Grumpster made that choice. Just like Ken made the choice to stay in the relationships with people that were abusing me and also engaging in doing that. And that's exactly what Grumpster did. Little does he know is that I know that, the times that he ghosted me or stood me up, and did those things to me actually was based upon Asuka's involvement of telling him to do that. I knew that even in the recent situation where he stood me up, I could tell just by the way his tone of voice when she's involved in it. I'm a little bit, too smart for their, my own britches, as I told him. Even others seen that too based on how he was talking to me. They could tell when he was under the wrath. Just like I could tell when Ken was under the wrath. Most people thought it was just when he was in that group, the way where he changed the way he talked. But no, even when he was engaging with them and talking to me privately, he spoke to me in disrespectful ways. The same thing happened with Grumpster. He started to speak to me in disrespectful ways once Asuka was in the picture, especially when she was around him. She lives like right across the hall from him, so unfortunately it would definitely never work with me and him with her in the picture because, he's under her wrath. He has to do what she says, So, now the creative part, as I've stated, is that, I came up with my boundaries, also applying with Ken's words of wisdom, is that, I'm too trusting, and that, that applied to now where I could change it to, I give too many chances. And that's exactly what I did this time in this current situation, is I gave too many chances with Grumpster. So, as for, the falling in love part, I never experienced love before with anybody. So I didn't know what those feelings were. And I was actually talking to my friend Carla and describing the feelings that I had when I was with Grumpster because I didn't know. I was like, wow, what is this and that? She's like, Shelley, that's love. Love is a feeling. I'm like, what? I was like, I never felt love before. So, like I discussed before, is that humans, they naturally crave or enjoy feelings of being loved, cared for, accepted, needed. Well, that's why it was so hard with the current situation, is because like the uniqueness with my relationship with Ken, the uniqueness with Grumpster was that he's the first person that I fell in love with. So it's still is extremely hard that I have to tie that with him doing those awful things to me that I never expected. Just like I never expected what Ken had done to me. So the realization part, it sounds nice, but it's actually very hard, because just like with Ken, is that I have to accept what he did to me and realize that I can't tolerate that no matter what. I can't change him. I can't expect him to change, and I don't deserve to have people like that in my life. The same would apply with Grumpster. That's where my realization came, is that I may want those feelings to stay in that person that I thought they were to be in my life as to what he gave me, but what do I need? I need to realize that I'm important and that I deserve better than that, and I can't make him be something that he isn't anymore, and it's not my fault that he chose that. So my realization is that I'm just going to continue my journey, and the hard part is for a victim is you're starting a whole new life, because you have to let go of that. That was my life at that time. I was in love, I was still working on my other dreams, but now my main focus is I'm just gonna have to work on my dream. And my biggest dream was to be independent and having a job, which is what I value and always wanted since I was a kid. And that's what my focus is on now. And I'm gonna have to realize that that want isn't gonna be there anymore, and that I have to move on. So, creative, inspirational realization. The unique thing about my mental health therapy is that I focus on the empathy, which with the empathy is that when doing so with your client is that you have to understand that it is the client's achievement and success as through getting through that therapy. It's also the client's, choice as to what involves in that therapy. Like for me, I came up with the inspirational quotes based upon Ken's words of wisdom. I had to apply that to myself. The mental health professional can give guidance and suggestions as for options to help that victim come to that realization that's based upon being creative and inspirational. So the success will end up being the victim, and the reason why that's so good is because that can actually help the victim even in future circumstances that happens in their life. So with the situation with Ken, that was actually a stepping stone as to helping me with my current one. And that's where the realization part came into play, is based upon what happened with Ken in that relationship, and seeing that happening again with another relationship, and realizing that I can't change that person, I deserve better, and that I shouldn't just keep on giving effort when that person doesn't give back to me. And going by the word respect and the letters and what it means, and sticking to that and moving on. It's going to be a process of healing, and like I said, I can sit there and say and teach all this stuff and say that I'm doing great, but you know what, I'm still in the process of healing too, and I can admit that. I can teach about it, but I'm still going through those steps too. I'm very glad and proud of myself as far as I've come, but it's a long process. But again, I feel proud about that, and that's part of my mental health therapy that I created, and that proudness is what will lead me and guide me to being able to build confidence and keep growing stronger even after bad experiences happen. Many people think, well, after this experience, nothing worse is going to happen, or, what are they happen? It's like my friend Nina, she's like, you're going to be learning and having bad relationships throughout your whole life. And, people think that once you get older, it's going to stop. These things happen throughout life. And I myself felt ashamed because of all the, toxic relationships I've had, but it's a part of life. And we all go through it as to having bad relationships. Unless we're going to plan on just staying inside and never talking to anybody, it's going to be a lifelong thing that we go through. So, the realization stage, as you can see, is that the victim and the assoholic will end up going through that if they choose to. Just like the victim needs to get to that realization stage and also make those choices to give up what they want to feelings in between to what they need. Same with the assoholic. They're gonna have to step up, be the bigger person, have the personal integrity to realize that they need to take responsibility and change their actions and behaviors in order to have a healthy relationship that will actually be more beneficial for them too. So all the feelings in between for them, that's something that I really don't get. I mean, like I said, it's very hard for somebody who has a big heart and is a victim themselves that would never do abusive behaviors on others intentionally. So it's very hard to understand, why people enjoy doing harm to others intentionally. So that's going to take a lot more analyzing. But then again, I don't think there's any actual proof in really showing it, because like I'm trying to point out is that they make that choice. There is no scientific evidence to say that there's some brain disorder for being an abuser. You choose to be an abuser, and that's it. You take responsibility for your chosen actions and behaviors. And realizing that is a part of what I now call Assoholics, toxic pity party addiction. Get rid of that addiction. Just like getting rid of those drugs. You're going to have to get rid of that addiction of wanting power and control over others that ends up harming innocent people that don't deserve it. So, that was the last stage, which is the realization, and I based it upon myself as to what I've gone through recently. So, I'm Shelley Rothus, and I'm a different kind of victim. See you next time.